Hello and welcome to Neography A to Z. On this channel, I take a look at constructed and natural writing systems for both their functionality and their aesthetic appeal. This review will cover the Atlantean alphabet, created initially by John Emerson with help from linguist Mark Okrand of Klingon fame, for use in the Disney film Atlantis, The Lost Empire. John Emerson worked for Disney from the 1960s on to the early 2000s. He was a graphic designer and worked in the art department of such films as Aladdin, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, as well as several other films. A link to his IMDb page is in the description of this video. The image on screen is from a now inaccessible short film of Mark Okrand instructing folks on the Atlantean language. As I understand it, it was included on the DVD version as a special feature called, quote, How to Speak Atlantean, end quote. From an article titled Atlantean, A Mother Tongue for a Mother Civilization, posted on Troy Press, September 30th of 2023. It reads, The Atlantean alphabet was meant to be evocative of many different alphabets, Hahn said. We looked at a lot of early typefaces, Phoenician, Greek, a lot of different cultures, even Asian typefaces, and then just tried to come up with something you couldn't quite put your finger on. It wasn't Arabic, it wasn't Chinese, it wasn't Phoenician or Sanskrit or something. It was just something that was uniquely Atlantean, but again was reminiscent of all those cultures. The actual 29-letter alphabet was a collaboration of Disney animators and Okrand, who suggested that the alphabet be boustrophedon, with the direction of letters changing with each line, first from right to left, then from left to right, and so on. Okrand said, quote, It's back and forth movement like water, so that worked, end quote. One of the directors, Kirk Wise, elaborated on how the first letter of the alphabet was developed. The Atlantean A is the shape developed by John Emerson. It is a miniature map of the city of Atlantis, i.e., the outside of the swirl is the cave and the inside shape of the silhouette of the city, and the dot is the location of the crystal. It's a treasure map, Kirk Wise. There's some debate on how to transliterate Atlantean words into the alphabet. The language was written in a, quote, reader script to clearly indicate how it was to be pronounced. For example, Guis doceptum sobinquam alitemcum. We do not need their help. Whether this should be transliterated as Guis doceptum sobinquam alitemcum or some other way is open to debate. Okrand's only public comment so far is, yes is Tig, no is Quam, and hello is Supak. Now let's take a look at the functionality. Atlantean functions as an alphabet and is written boustrophedon in horizontal lines running alternately from left to right and right to left. In theory, the script can be used to write multiple languages, including English. It lacks punctuation and is unicameral. That is, there are no separate cases, such as majuscule and minuscule. You'll also notice that there are no ascenders or descenders. This is unusual for natural alphabets. Interestingly, while there are 29 letters, only 20 represent sounds that are ultimately used in the Atlantean language. I'll read the passage on screen. Nishintop Atlantisag, kelobtim gabrin, karoklimik, betgim demotim, net, getunosintem, bernotlimik, get, kagib, lewidyoch, which means apparently, spirits of Atlantis, forgive me for defiling your chamber and bringing intruders into the land. You'll notice that the example on screen from Omniglot is not written in boustrophedon, but right to left. Now let's take a look at the aesthetics. While many of the Atlantean letters are never even seen in the film, they all look a bit busy. The fan-made sample on the right here also shows that they're not easily written. The stylistic choices made are mostly understandable, but an easily read script they do not make. Similar to the film Arrival, the language and the linguist involved are essential to the plot of the film Atlantis. Thankfully, though, there are no coffee stains to be seen. The script factors in greatly, as it is said that the modern Atlanteans have forgotten how to read it, and that the script is only readable by the protagonist, Milo, which is a bit strange. Oh, spoilers, by the way. Apologies if you haven't seen this 2001 movie. Conceptually, the script does a lot of heavy lifting by supporting the main plot. Unfortunately, the design aesthetic doesn't seem to have met the moment. I guess they were going for a sort of primitive but intricate sort of feel, but nah, this just misses that. While being useful as a plot device is really cool for a conlang and a conscript, it has to work. It has to be appealing, not just practical. An alphabet was definitely the way to go, most especially for the audience enthusiasm and accessibility. But something closer to Greek or even Phoenician would have likely been better. Also, my gut tells me that it for sure was not Mark Okren who decided to put a dot in all of the vowels. That just screams art department to me. I have not undertaken trying to translate the script as it was used in the film, but I will say they seem to have used it consistently, which does make it seem ever so slightly more realistic. Let's not comment on the mythos, though. This ain't that kind of review. I do wonder if they thought through how the language might be analyzed, or if they just added it to move the plot along. As much as we hear and see of it, it could have easily just been gibberish, and most folks wouldn't have thought twice about it. Honestly, I wish there had been more interest and that more movies had been made. If nothing else, we might have gotten more Atlantean language and maybe even more of a stylized script. That is to say, a script that seems more lived in, with more nuance. I also really think that having the protagonist have to teach the natives how to read their own language detracts from the plausibility and destroys the suspension of disbelief for me. If the alphabet had been designed closer to a real world script, Milo's ability just, might have made more sense and it might have played better. Realism has no place around these parts, of course. The tattoo on the right reads lost in English. The rest are just the letter A from the alphabet, but also, as mentioned, supposedly a map of Atlantis, maybe? See, even though there is no official dictionary or grammar, folks seemingly cannot resist displaying their love for a fictional language. And of course, if you have a little extra pocket change, Redbubble has merch like the Atlantis t-shirt on the left. And for some strange reason, the LDS bookstore, yes, the Mormon church, has a customizable ring with the Atlantean alphabet on it. Neither are very expensive, but still very weird stuff. Pageshanech, you are all thanked. Thank you for watching. I am rating Atlantean 4 out of 5 for functionality and 2 out of 5 for aesthetics. It functions well enough for the way it was designed. I know why they made the extra letters, but I don't like it. And the dot in the vowels is completely unnecessary. The busyness of the script and the weirdish way you must move your hand to write the letters legibly is telling that an artist made it. They weren't thinking about writing, they were thinking about drawing, which are two very different things. Anyhow, those are my thoughts on Atlantean. I'm interested in hearing what you think about it. Next time, we will be discussing Britton Watkins' work with the Vulcan script and the calligraphy. So be sure to click the bell button to be notified when the next episode is posted. Aurebesh was initially created by Joe Johnston, a visual effects creator and designer that worked on all 3 of the first trilogy films. The original script was later developed by Stephen Crane for use in a series of Star Wars games. Notably, this system has had a similar development history to that of the Klingon and Gallifreyan scripts, both previously reviewed on this channel, and you should definitely go watch those videos. All of these started as set dressing and later were developed outside of the films and shows they were first featured in. Before we go on, I would like to say that I grew up with Star Wars, and the original trilogy was a large part of my childhood. I am a fan. By the way, make sure to watch this video in its entirety as we have a special guest offering their perspective on the Aurebesh system. The first images of Aurebesh appeared in the 1983 movie Return of the Jedi. However, the text on screen was never explained, and based on the later adaptation of the script, was ultimately meaningless. Of note, this movie only came out almost exactly a year before Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. This is important as it demonstrates not only an increased and ongoing interest in science fiction media, but a depth to the world building that was not as prevalent before the 1980s. While not prevalent, Aurebesh was used in each of the prequel trilogy films of the early 2000s. Given its minimal use, it doesn't truly add to the world building as much as it might have. However, it should be noted that several other ciphers were used for specific species and planets throughout both the prequels and the sequel trilogies. The script was used sparingly in the sequel trilogy films. For example, in The Force Awakens, on the pilots' vests. In The Last Jedi, there was a message from Commander Poe Dameron. Quote, "Attention, this is Commander Poe Dameron of the Republic Fleet. I have an urgent communique for General Hugs." End quote. In The Rise of Skywalker, it was seen on a few tactical readouts and maps. While the use of Aurebesh in these films and prequel trilogy speak to the world building, the sparsity speaks to the lack of interest, or maybe even a lack of confidence on the part of the filmmakers and the need for the script. Now we'll take a look at functionality. Crane's version, seen here, assigned English letters to the existing symbols and fleshed out additional symbols. He later added punctuation. Clearly, even though described as being used to write, quote, galactic basic, end quote, Aurebesh is nothing more than a slightly altered cipher script for English, one that ignores linguistic understanding of phonology or phonetics in favor of an impractical aesthetic that seems intended to evoke science fiction vibes, while ultimately failing to even be a decent cipher. Here we see the 8 symbols that represent English digraphs. The nth and the oneth could be E and U respectively, but as there is no unified explanation available on the web, there's no way to be certain. The crenth does not have an English equivalent, but is most likely meant to be the voiceless velar fricative ch, as in lach. Notably, there is only the thesh, which does not seem to take into account the 2 distinct sounds of the voiceless fricative th, as in thigh, and the voiced fricative the, as in father. This is common in ciphers that bother to include the th digraph and further complicates the use of such ciphers, such as previously reviewed in Gallifreyan. Obviously, the numerals are just a 7-segment display type adaptation of the Arabic numerals used by most of the world. A second set of numerals were created for a role-playing source book published in 1995 without much further explanation. Anyone that has ever done the crypto puzzle in the newspaper will quickly notice that Aurebesh is a very simplistic cipher. Also, close observers will notice that whoever created the sample on screen did so inconsistently with the symbols available. For example, they used the trill plus the herf instead of the digraph symbol thesh. Regardless of Aurebesh being a cipher, it appears to be used throughout the Star Wars universe with far more consistency than it had originally. Keeping in mind, though, that a cipher is a cipher and always will be a cipher, despite it being consistent. Now we'll go over the aesthetics. While some folks have tried to create calligraphic versions, they seemingly have omitted the characters for digraphs, and the majority of the calligraphy versions available online tend to lack a level of consistency of both character shape and writing style. These letters, and I use that term very loosely, are difficult to write in any practical way and are far too similar to survive in their current form without massive changes and adaptations. Similar to other scripts reviewed on this channel, Aurebesh should have remained as set dressing, most especially since the artists that have worked on it never bothered to learn anything about phonetics or phonology. And the profits don't end with the films. As can be seen on screen, Disneyland has decided to get in on the cipher game, offering numerous gifts and souvenirs that feature Aurebesh, as well as park signs that, I guess, are meant to maybe enhance the theme park experience. Keen observers will note the lack of digraph characters, again, creating less consistency across the usage of the script. It seems like the experience has nothing to do with being accurate, as long as you're having a good time and sinking your teeth into some of those Ronto roasters. Like the other scripts reviewed on this channel, Star Wars fans have seen fit to get themselves tattooed. Despite it maybe looking cool, this is completely meaningless and may just as well be in the Latin alphabet. The tattoo on the far left says humanoid, as if anyone might be confused. The middle tattoo is a description of the parts of a lightsaber. The tattoo on the far right is rotated 90 degrees clockwise, but it says Jason, spelled Jayson. If you love Star Wars and want a cool souvenir without marking your body for all eternity, Etsy has no shortage of schlock for you to spend your hard-earned cash on. Sure, it looks cool, but because Aurebesh is only a cipher, these trinkets are no different than just getting the same items with English written on them, unless your membership to the Tatooine commune dues are already paid in full. Now, I have the honor of introducing our special guest commentator with his views on Aurebesh. So, without any more ceremony or pomp, Mr. David J. Peterson of Game of Thrones, Dune, Halo, and Langtime Studio fame has a few words.
Aurebesh is one of my least favorite created scripts for a television or movie series, partly because it's so close aesthetically to being something that works. And yet, the more you look at it, the more frustrating it gets. You don't have to go very far. You have these bizarre letters that take more effort to write than a character in an alphabet should take. That is, they take the kind of manual dexterity you would expect from a logographic system. I mean, you can start with the very first one, Auric. Try to do that with your hand. Try to do that with a pencil and see what would happen. A symbol like that would get eroded over time. And even if you want to say, well, maybe this is just a print, writing system, just for view screens. Why aren't they optimized to look different, especially on low resolution screens? Compare something like OSC to Grek to Peck with a Q to Oneth. These symbols, oh God, Zarek and Usk, these things are very, very close. Chesh, the one with the X, and are easily misidentified. Furthermore, breaking the kind of aesthetic of the older type of view screen that you would have seen in the 70s and 80s, why are there these characters? Most of them have straight lines, but a few of them have slight curves for apparently no reason at all. Looking at Forn and Oneth and Genth and Peth, and Nairn is the worst. Nairn is the worst. It looks like they just put a caret next to an open paren. How could you? And then there's poor Kresh that looks like a punctuation symbol. And Senth, good God. It's a frustrating experience looking at this writing system.
I would like to say thank you to everyone watching these videos. I appreciate the support and the continued engagement. Overall, I give Aurebesh a rating of 1 out of 5 for functionality and a 1 out of 5 for aesthetics. Functionality because it is just a very simplistic cipher for English, and 1 out of 5 for aesthetics because it is not very artistically pleasing. Similar to David, I find this script to be largely a waste. It's impractical for handwriting, and the characters are phonologically useless and or redundant, and overall, it's just not very artistic. Having said all of that, I'm still very much a fan of the films, and may the force be with you all. Those are my thoughts on Aurebesh. I'm interested in hearing what you think of the script. Next time, we will be discussing Ayeri by Karsten Becker, so be sure to click the bell button to be notified when the next episode is posted. This episode, we are reviewing the Tahano Hikamu, or round script, used for the conlang Ayeri, created by Karsten Becker, beginning in 2003. I have been familiar with this project almost since its inception, as I've known Karsten for nearly 20 years and have been a long-time admirer of his work. Ayeri, not being from a movie, book, or television show, is not widely known outside of the conlang community, and it is a personal project, so not many folks who don't know Karsten know about the project. On screen is the Ayeri translation of Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I will attempt to read. Apologies in advance for my pronunciation. Savisayon kenamikan tiganeri ne ketanyeri sino ne kamo ri toretos tenuban ne iprang neang mya rankyon setanyas kunetu. The translation, of course, is that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and they are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Also on the screen is a short sample from the Ayeri grammar. He who cannot write believes it not to be toil. As a quick aside, Karsten made what he calls Tahanoveno, or beautiful script, as an ornamental script, also to be used for a Yeri, but he has since discarded it. This script is by far one of the most beautiful and inventive scripts I have seen in almost 30 years of researching and learning about orthography. Now we'll take a look at functionality. Tahano Hikamu is an abugida, or alpha-syllabary, meaning it is a segmental writing system in which consonant-vowel sequences are written as units. Each unit is based on a consonant letter, and vowel notation is secondary, similar to a diacritical mark. The script is monocameral, that is, there is no distinction between capital and minuscule letters. It is written in lines from left to right, flowing from the top of the page to the bottom. Tahano Hikamu is modeled after and inspired by Brahmi scripts. And to those familiar with Brahmi scripts, that will become increasingly apparent during this review. As with many abugidas, the basic syllable is CV, or consonant vowel, but other considerations must be made for more complex syllables. The methods of writing these secondary and even tertiary phonological aspects are what makes Tahano Hikamu unique among the majority of neographies. On screen to the left, we see the base consonants, and on to the right, we see additional consonants used primarily for non-Ayeri words. The syllabic nature of Tahano Hikamu is apparent in the example on the left of the screen. Pa plus ngis becomes pangis. This demonstrates the ambisyllabic nature of the nga character. Ambisyllabic means that nga can simultaneously act as the coda of one syllable and the onset of the following syllable. On the right, we see ligatures that are prevalent and result in recognizable patterns, even with noticeable changes to each grapheme. Interestingly, the nana ligature actually represents a disyllabic character, a feature not common among the majority of abugidas. The Tahano Hikamu vowels are typically marked above the consonant that precedes them. However, this is the primary slot for the corresponding vowel, and secondary vowels can be marked below or in the secondary slot. So the pa syllable becomes pe with the appropriate diacritic. The independent vowels always appear above the vowel carrier, which has the inherent value of a, which is the most common inherent value across the majority of natural abugidas. There are also corresponding diacritics that are placed below the consonants as mentioned previously. These are used for secondary vowel indication, as can be seen in the ya to ye to yeya example. Secondary vowels very occasionally need to be spelled as independent vowels. For example, when the secondary vowel is long, as can be seen in the ru to roi and the ka to kai examples above. The ka to kai example demonstrates also how a diphthong can be indicated with only one diacritic, even though there are no unique diacritics for the said diphthong. Syllables can also include additional diacritics to mark things such as vowel length, gemination, and syllable codas. Here we see examples of basic syllables as multiple diacritic marks indicate various phonological aspects, thus making the information compact and complex. In the ki to kie example, we see the slot switching, meaning the I or the E diacritic moves from below to above, allowing for the vowel lengthening mark to be placed below the syllable. Secondary articulations such as palatalization, aspiration, and glottalization can be marked by descending diacritics. These include vowel lengthening and cross-syllable palatalization of certain plosive consonants. Further descending diacritics mark a deletion of the inherent vowel a, nasalization, and gemination. These diacritics set Tahano Hikamu in a category of realism apart from most abugidas and neographies found in the conlanging community. There are also vowel-altering diacritics to indicate diphthongs and raised vowels. These are obligatorily prepended diacritics used for sounds not typically found in a yeri, except for the lintan kusang, or the double sound. The double sound also marks changes to ya proper when a vowel follows, but it remains a double sound when ya follows, the change in spelling is driven by the semivocalic nature of y. This is seen in the tipui to tipuya example on screen. The diacritics you're seeing on screen are allographic, meaning that a letter or combination of letters that is one of several ways of representing one phoneme, such as having two P's in the word hopping represent the one phoneme P. The diacritics being varied and duplicated requires the reader closely pay attention to each syllable as written and adds a depth to the orthographical representation of Ayeri not often seen in neographies. The ability to write non-Ayeri phonemes also demonstrates adaptability and aggregation of linguistic depth. Considerations for stress, syllabification, and vowel length all play a role in diacritic selection and placement. These considerations, while focusing on the basic CV or consonant-vowel syllable, often cut across syllables, showing that Ayeri as an abugida is far more than a simple set of CV characters with a few diacritics. Subscript diacritics are placed below the character. Superscript diacritics are placed above. Many of the diacritics in the Tohano Hikamu script can be placed above the syllable and consonant in order to give the author options, most especially if multiple diacritics will be needed. Ayeri uses a duodecimal number system. There are digits for 0, so the system is positional, similar to the system that most viewers are already familiar with. Tohano Hikamu's syllable modifying diacritic inventory is large and intricate, and so is its collection of punctuation. Unique diacritics, like the dangaran for marking names, alleviates confusion and the need for the majuscule-minuscule system. The diacritics extend to numerals as a way to mark decimals and/or fractions. Now we'll go over the aesthetics. Clearly drawing inspiration from Southeast Asian and Brahmic scripts, Carsten Becker sought to make a personal artistic language that was both euphonic and visually pleasing. On the left of the screen, we see the first design for an Ayeri script from February of 2004. The image on the right is from over a year later in 2005, which was a first draft for Tohano Hikamu. On the left, we see the book style, which is the most common style used for samples and web posts in Ayeri. On the right, we see the same text in the angular style, a style that Carsten expressly designed to evoke the Javanese script. Here we have the same text across two samples in the cursive style. Note how different they are and that a few of the diacritics are marked above in one and below in the other. Regardless of the differences, each example exudes style, creativity, and artistry rarely seen in conlang circles. A translation of Silent Night, originally in German, then with English and Ayeri, and written in the Tohano Hikamu script. The compactness of Tohano Hikamu compared to the Latin alphabet is notable. This is common among abugidas, but given the aesthetic appeal of this script, it is quite striking in this example. This black letter style of Tohano Hikamu is my least favorite, but is still admirable as it shows the adaptability of the script to a wide range of writing tools and aesthetics. Kutayang vas, which means thank you in Ayeri. I am reading Ayeri and the Tohano Hikamu script 5 for 5 for functionality and 5 out of 5 for aesthetics. This script is perhaps the pinnacle of mixing creativity and linguistic knowledge. While explicitly based on Brahmic scripts, most apparently Javanese, Tohano Hikamu is more than unique and is very artistic in a way that sets it far and above the average script seen online. The care and attention to detail is admirable and worthy of more than just this silly review. Those are my thoughts on Ayeri and Tohano Hikamu. I'm interested in hearing what you think of the script. Next time we will be discussing Heptapod B from the movie Arrival, so be sure to click the bell button to be notified when the next episode is posted. The Dhaka is a constructed script invented in 2016 by Brian Bork for his artistic constructed language, or ArtLang, Lorto. It has gone through multiple revisions before it reached the final form in mid-2018. Dadaka was inspired by Devanagari, Tibetan, the Ujin style, and Tingwar. Currently, the script is solely used to write Lorto. This review is a bit different in that it isn't quite a review, as I already did one of this script in 2018 on my blog. This redo review will be more in depth and delve into how Brian has developed Dadaka over the years. I stand by these words from 2018, but let's look a little deeper this time. Now let's take a look at the functionality. Dadaka is an alphabet with abegedic elements. It is written left to right and uses some standard punctuation. There is also a decimal digit system used for positional notation, very much like Arabic numerals. The sample you see on screen demonstrates that the vowels were once marked with disconnected diacritics, and that the script overall functioned much more like an abjad. However, you can still see that there are strong brush strokes and a very clear definition of what a letter is. Probably the only thing that I would encourage Brian to do moving forward would be to add maybe IPA or some glossing or transliteration when he puts his samples online. But I can understand that once you put up the chart and once you have explained the phonetics or phonology, you kind of hope or assume that people will go to your website and check it out anyway. So maybe it's just that. But other than that, you can't get past that it functions perfectly the way it is designed. Now let's take a look at the aesthetics. As you can see in the examples on screen, Brian has made a point of taking extensive notes while simultaneously developing his script alongside his conlang. This is just good practice overall, as it helps you track changes, but also allows you to slowly evolve your script to peak functionality and aesthetics. I would also add that it gives you space to make mistakes and learn from them as you go. Let's watch a short clip of Brian practicing his script, available on the Lorto IG profile. The sample on the left is from April of 2018, while the sample on the right is from December of 2022. This is from the Lortho Instagram profile, which is open and viewable online. The oldest and the youngest of the samples is what you see posted here on the screen. You can see that the brushstrokes are more consistent and that there is confidence behind the younger of the samples. The older of the samples is quite good too, but does have quite a bit of roughness to it. On this screen, we're going to look at vowel notation. On the left side, diphthongs. On the right side, you'll see the standard vowels. This first image is from 2017, while the second image is from 2018. You can see that the diphthong diacritics are now more connected in 2018's version. The very first version is from May of 2017. You can see that this is more of just an outline to figure out where the vowels will be placed. And if you take a look at the E, you can see that it is actually not connected to the letter, where the other diacritics are. In July of 2017, you can see that this sample mirrors what you see in the May 2017, but the lines are more defined. If you look at the August of 2017 version, you can see it's more calligraphic, more cursive, more freehandish, but you can still very much clearly identify the vowels. And if you look at the June of 2018, which is considered the final form, you can see that everything is much more defined and that the O diacritic has changed completely and is also now disconnected, much like the I. This is the Lorto script in its oldest form when it was still considered an abjad. You can see that there is still consistency in the overall letter design. However, with the simple tick marks, you see that Brian was not satisfied with the vowel notation. Each of the images you will see on screen are from 2017, and thus some of the earliest examples of the script as an alphabet. You can tell that at this stage, Brian is fleshing out how the letter forms will flow with time. From this final image, you can see that he has come to what he considers to be more or less the final forms of the letters. You can see here in the example on screen that Brian begins to add punctuation at this point. The script sort of gets this lived in look at this stage. The example you see here is just a master class in practicing your script. This example reportedly took Brian 3 hours to write in full. It's easy to see why. You can see the consistency of lettering that comes with years of practice. Of course, it doesn't hurt that Brian is a trained calligrapher, but this is his invention, and you can see how much care and attention he has given to slowly developing the functionality and artistry of this system. Here we see Brian's work on papyrus. I can speak from personal experience that writing on papyrus is a much different thing than your average sheet of paper. Imagine trying to write on butterfly wings, wings that are crusty and brittle, and trying to fly away. Yeah, pretty much that. This sample is from 2019, and here we see further progress in the shapes and flows of the letters, as well as a much more naturalistic movement from word to word. Brian labeled this image a quote unquote work in progress and also the common script Abagida format, but it looks like an older version of the script to me. Nonetheless, you can still see the basic letter forms. You can also see that the strokes are confident, straight, and very well put together. This sample on Brian's website is labeled The Unlucky Fox. There is no glossing or IPA or even a translation, but just look at it. Take it all in. This is a font that Brian made for his script. It's available for download. This is what years of development looks like. Careful study, revision, and practice. Hours and hours of practice. That's how a well done system takes shape. Thank you for watching. I stand by my 2018 rating of 4 out of 5 for functionality and 5 out of 5 for aesthetics. I'm not too keen on mixing Abugidas and Abjads, but that's just my take. It's still an amazing script. I also hope that you enjoyed this surprise revisited review. I may look back at my blog and pull a few others out, uh, but only if I can find enough material on the script or if they seem like a review would be maybe worth it to go through and do. Anyway, while I rate 4 out of 5 for functionality and 5 out of 5 for aesthetics, Brian gets a 10 out of 10 for dedication. And I can tell you from my own experience and from interviewing Brian and talking about his script that dedication is what it takes. If you don't give the time to the script or to the conlang even, you're not going to get anything out of it. You can't just post a chart online and wait for feedback or praise. You have to put in the work. Anyway, that's all for this surprise revisit review. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Keep scripting. The Denis alphabet and language were created by Richard A. Watson for the game and novel franchise Myst. This review will be rather short, mainly because of a lack of source material, but also because this script just isn't that good. But we'll get to that. Interestingly, unlike a lot of scripts reviewed on this channel, there were legitimate attempts to copyright the alphabet and numbering system that were ultimately denied. A link to the full document is in the description of this video. I do wonder, though, if this request had been approved, what that might have meant in general for the world of conscripts and conlangs associated with other franchises. Now let's take a look at the functionality. Denis is a straightforward alphabet, nothing very fancy at all. It only has two punctuation marks, a period and an apostrophe. It should be noticeable to folks that study languages to some degree or another that the romanization is very, very Englishy. This sample from the Omniglot page on Denis demonstrates that the script is written from left to right in horizontal lines. Again, nothing too fancy. The accompanying language does seem to have some grammar put into it, but there's also a subtle feeling of kind of an English relax. A link to a grammar outline is in the description of the video. Now let's take a look at the aesthetics. In cryptography, not conlanging or conscripting, but in cryptography, the Polybius square, also known as the Polybius checkerboard, is a device invented by the ancient Greek historian and scholar Polybius for fractionating plaintext characters so they can be represented by a smaller set of symbols. It seems a similar system was used to divine this script, but somehow got it all wrong. If you're going to use a Polybius square to establish a pattern for your characters, why do a third of them need to be irregular? Why not just make them all unique? Or even better, throw the square in the garbage where it belongs and try something altogether new. What's worse is they decided to base not just the digits on the same silly square, but the numbering and counting as well. This is like trying to make a souffle somehow taste good with spicy hot Cheetos. It just doesn't go together. The Denis conlang doesn't match having this type of number system, and it's ugly. Even within the game, the script is barely legible and looks more like it was once something else entirely, but has worn away to this current sad state after eons of being ignored. Now, there are fans of the language and the script, and many of them have put in quite a bit of hard work showing their admiration for both the system and the language. But that really doesn't make the system or the language any better. Part of me wants to give the system a pass, because in some ways it's an homage to a Tingwar-esque type system. But at least Tingwar has additional letters and modes. And what the hell is this? How is this even legible? I realize it's a screenshot from a computer game of a chalkboard in a dimly lit room, but come on, who can even read that scratch? I realize sometimes games and stories that involve magic and wizards and sorcery can sometimes inspire people. And if there's a language or symbols involved, people can imbue those symbols with this sense of magic. But I can assure you, there's nothing magical about this script. If anything, this script is just a code for a poorly done conlang. Probably the one good thing about Denis' alphabet are these monograms I found. A link to their page is in the description of this video. But again, there isn't much out there other than the occasional nugget of artistry with this script, and most of it really lacks any serious creativity. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, and other non-gender specific folks. The only Denis script item for sale on Etsy, a bracelet for $100. Can you imagine paying that much money for a script this bad? And of course, what would a silly script be without folks willing to wear it everywhere all of the time? It just looks like scribbles, or maybe Arabic done by a drunken tattoo artist. I will never stop being amazed at people's dedication to absolutely atrocious writing systems. The Denis alphabet gets a rating of 2 out of 5 for functionality and 2 out of 5 for aesthetics. And if I'm honest, the 2 out of 5 for functionality is because it's just a basic alphabet. There's nothing extra. It only has 2 punctuation marks. I'm sure some folks out there love it, but it's just not for me. It's far too simplistic. I realize it's meant to accompany a video game and a series of novels, but if they wanted it to be realistic, they should have put in the work. The grammar for the language even looks very Englishy, like perhaps the conlang is just a relax. I don't know, but obviously I've made my feelings known about this script. Those are my thoughts. I'm interested in hearing what you think. Have you read any of the books? Have you played the game? Full disclosure, I've never played the game, nor have I read any of the novels. but the script speaks for itself, and so do I. Anyway, stay tuned for the next script review and be sure to click the bell button to be notified when the next episode is posted. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I very much appreciate your time and thank you for watching. As a note, all relevant links used in the making of this video are in the description. All information is the property of its creators and is openly available online.